Hello, I'm Charlotte from the Sunshine Community Gardens Education Team. Today, we're working on the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired student garden. Our land is provided to us by the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And so they are one of our main charitable organizations, and our members give not only a lot of hours to keep their student garden maintained, but also we do give financial donations as well. And today's topic is directly related to the student garden at Sunshine. We have 3 beds which are raised to the height of wheelchair or less accessible. And so we call these the all-access beds. And we discovered in the course of removing an old crop from these beds that we had damage in the bed structure. So what we did was some temporary repairs. In the process of that, we discovered that the soil was significantly depleted, and the most depleted aspect were those things which are the living components of soil: bacteria, the mycorrhiza or fungal component, as well as our worms, our vermiculture components. We couldn't afford time or material-wise to start completely from scratch. So rather than going out and buying a bedding mix, we actually are going to follow a kind of a homemade recipe. So what we did is we laid out a tarp, and on that tarp we created piles which were small enough to work with. On the second step, we had 4 parts of turkey compost. Take our compost piles, and we added 1 unit of moistened rice hulls, and we're using those for structure. They do break down relatively quickly in the heat, but they are a good structural component for 1 or 2 seasons. And then they add a lot of silica to the soil. We did an equivalent amount of moistened coconut coir. So in southern gardens, we tend to use coconut coir instead of peat moss. And there are big debates that are raging of which has the biggest ecological impact. But we know that peat bogs are not an infinite resource, and we know that coconut coir is renewable, but we have to ship it from some distance. So this is approximately another cubic foot. Just rough. We're doing it more by portions than being exact. These structural components do very little decomposition, especially the perlite and the coconut coir. The next step in our amending of our compost side of our recipe are the components which we use much less of, and they're mostly our mineral components. So we're going to put on 2 cups of green sand, which comes from Texas, and that's going to give us some microminerals that are slow release. And then I'm going to put on roughly a handful of a multi-mineral that you can buy at any amendment store called azomite. Then I'll do a little sprinkle of magnesium sulfate or Epsom salt. That allows us to release the calcium that's available in our other components. Slow release pelleted sulfur to create sulfuric acid. That will also help start the process. Our whole goal here is to get our microbial and our bacterial colonies going again. So once I have those microminerals added, the next step is we mix our enriched pile, which is the pile that started with compost, which has all of our enrichment elements. And as soon as that's thoroughly mixed, the next step is to combine our old soil with our enriched soil. And once that is evenly combined, to save time and budget, we did not take all of the soil out of these old beds. We took 2/3 of the old soil out. We repaired the rot that was evident in our wood. And then we put down a layer of cardboard, which is just going to decompose into a nice compost and a nice worm food. And we put on top of that some leaves from our leaf pile. And I sprinkled a little coffee ground on that, and then we watered it. We then go to the next step, which was to put half of it in our prepared beds, and followed by a watering. And then we do the next half of our enriched potting mix into our beds, a layer of watering, and then the final step is to cover it with a mulch. And in our case, we're going to use alfalfa hay and just put about a 3 to 4 inch layer of alfalfa hay. So, that was a lot of work, but we've got our final product, and I hope everyone learned not only about how to maintain the soil or renew the soil of a raised bed, but even many of the things that I showed today would apply to amending any Central Texas garden, even if it's an in-ground bed. And finally, that you learned that the last thing that you always do is make sure you mulch your work at the end, because in Central Texas, it's all about saving water.